안녕하세요, 여러분. 저는 영국 대사관 기후평화 팀장 Katrine Sasaki라고 합니다. 만나서 반갑습니다. 부끄럽게도 저는 거의 5년 동안 한국어를 공부해 왔는데 아직도 잘못해서 이제 영어로 말씀드리겠습니다. 미안합니다. For those of you that couldn't understand my very poor Korean, my name is Katrine Sasaki. I'm the head of the Climate Change and Energy section at the British Embassy in Seoul. And it's a pleasure to be here to address you at this industry-to-industry emissions trading and market readiness seminar. And I'd like to thank Mr. Dirk Forrester and colleagues at IETA, and also Mr. Yunmin Park and colleagues from Ministry of Environment for organising this event today. And I think there will be a very good opportunity for lots of productive discussions over the next 2 days. The British Embassy strongly welcomes opportunities such as this for business and government to discuss and find ways to improve and make the emissions trading scheme as effective as it can possibly be. As we know, climate change is one of the biggest threats to global prosperity and security. In many parts of the world, we're already feeling the impacts of climate change. I know we certainly are in the UK, and I think in Korea as well. We're seeing these kind of impacts through more extreme weather events and shifting climate patterns. And unless we radically reduce our emissions to limit temperature rise to less than 2 degrees, we're only going to see more and more of these kind of severe impacts. And I think potentially the impacts could be catastrophic. So as Mr. Park from the Ministry of Environment said, emissions trading scheme is extremely important, and the bottom line is to reduce carbon emissions. And 2015 is going to be a hugely important year in the international climate change negotiations. As you probably know, there's going to be a conference of the parties meeting in Paris at the end of the year, where hopefully countries will come together to agree a legally binding deal to limit temperature rise to below 2 degrees. And this binding deal should include emissions reduction commitments from all countries for the first time ever. And Korea is going to have a very important role to play in all of this, because many countries look to Korea as a model of low carbon growth and a bridge between developed and developing countries. And I think one reason for this is the leadership that Korea has shown so far on the climate change agenda. This is including through the ambitious emissions reduction commitment of a 30% reduction of emissions against business as usual by 2020, and also, of course, because of your implementation of the emissions trading scheme, which started in January this year. So Korea was the first Asian country to pass legislation introducing a national emissions trading scheme, putting it ahead of the curve as more and more countries are now introducing similar schemes. And carbon pricing mechanisms are now being rolled out across many parts of the world, and currently around 40 national and over 20 subnational jurisdictions have already implemented or scheduled emissions trading schemes or other carbon pricing mechanisms such as a carbon tax. As Mr. Park mentioned, most recently and notably, the 7 ETS pilot schemes in China are a prelude to a national emissions trading scheme that will begin from 2016. And the implementation of the ETS in Korea, I think, was particularly notable because, as Mr. Park mentioned, there was quite strong opposition from industry. And I know that there are still many issues relating to industry's concerns over the ETS effect on profitability and international competitiveness. And I think this experience somewhat mirrors that of the EU. So the EU ETS was introduced in 2005. And it was also groundbreaking as the first international emissions trading system for greenhouse gas emissions. It covers around 11,000 energy-intensive industrial installations throughout Europe, including power stations, refineries, and large manufacturing plants. It's a cornerstone of the EU's climate policy and a key tool for reducing industrial greenhouse gas emissions. But the EU scheme also faced a lot of opposition and concern from those in industry who were worried about effects on international competitiveness. But I think we've seen the situation change a lot in the UK and the EU since the time that that ETS was implemented. Because more and more analysis is showing that it is going to be far more costly to just let climate change happen and deal with its impacts than it will be to grasp the problem and try and tackle it and ensure that we don't experience those negative impacts. There's also a huge business opportunity here because the low carbon sector is currently worth £4 trillion globally and is growing at 4 to 5% per year. So I think particularly in the UK and the EU, businesses are now seeing climate change as an opportunity rather than a threat. And in the UK, the Confederation of British Industry, or CBI, which is the UK's largest industry body, is now actively lobbying for strong climate policy. Industry no longer see low carbon and economic growth as being mutually exclusive. They see them as being mutually compatible. And industry in the UK is calling for stable and long-term policy frameworks from government that will give them the certainty to invest in low carbon. And this is exactly what initiatives such as the EU ETS and Korean emissions trading schemes can provide. In a recent CBI publication called The Path to Paris, the CBI reiterates the importance of carbon pricing, and in particular emissions trading, as the most effective way to reduce emissions, as it finds the cheapest sources of emissions reductions in the economy. And of course, I think we all know emissions trading scheme in the EU and similarly in Korea have not been without their problems, and I think particularly at the early stages there are still lots of issues to work through. And the EU is currently looking at ways to address some of the issues with its own scheme. But I think what is clear is that putting a cap on carbon guarantees carbon reductions and it enables countries and businesses to deliver those reductions in the most economical way possible for them. So in the UK, companies who want to see the right conditions to invest in low carbon technology and low carbon infrastructure are increasingly making the business case for a stronger EU emissions trading scheme. So as the emissions trading scheme gets underway here in Korea, I think seminars such as this provide a fantastic opportunity to hear from businesses about their experiences operating under the scheme. And I think emissions trading schemes can only work if businesses are prepared and understand how to participate in them effectively. So hopefully over the next couple of days during this seminar, you'll be able to find out more not only about the role of emissions trading schemes and the function of the scheme, but also about the opportunities that they can present for business. So finally, I just want to make the point that the transition to a low carbon economy is a global trend that is not going to go away. As we move towards the Paris meeting in December, countries are going to be announcing their contributions to a global climate deal, and I hope they will be committing to ever deeper emissions reductions. The EU has already announced its target and is committed to reducing emissions by at least 40% by 2030, compared to 1990 levels. Now, that's an ambitious goal, but I hope it will encourage other countries, including Korea, to come forward with an equally ambitious contribution soon. Because I think what's clear is that it's those that lead the way, whether it be on emissions trading or other carbon reduction policy, that are going to reap the most benefit from the low carbon transition. So I think I've probably been talking too long. I know there's quite a few people in here that have flown a long way and probably feeling a bit jet lagged. So I will now wrap up and let you get on to the more interesting discussion. But just want to say thank you once again to IETA, to the Ministry of Environment and everybody here for making this opportunity. And I'm sure that you're going to have a very, very productive 2 days of discussions. So thank you very much.